In a world where people walk past those in need, one man's act of kindness changed everything. This is the story of how a single black man risked it all to save a policewoman, and what happened next. Shocked an entire nation. The night was quiet except for the roar of the rain hammering against the black asphalt. The sky hung heavy with thunder, and the wind howled like a warning. Out on the empty highway, the flashing hazard lights of a police cruiser barely cut through the darkness. The car was wrecked, its front twisted against a concrete barrier. The driver's door hung open, and a faint figure lay motionless on the slick road beside it. The officer's name tag read Rachel Myers, though no one was close enough to see it. The world had turned its back on her that night. Cars passed, headlights washing over her for seconds before fading into the storm. Nobody stopped. Nobody cared to look twice at a stranger lying in the rain. But one car slowed down. The sound of tires skidding echoed against the wet road as an old gray sedan came to a halt. Inside sat Marcus Hill, a single black man in his mid-30s, on his way home after another exhausting double shift at the steel plant. His hands were rough from years of work, his eyes tired, but his heart was still good. Something deep inside him, an instinct, maybe humanity itself, told him to pull over. He didn't think about the time, or the danger, or the fact that helping a cop could go very wrong for a man like him. He just knew someone needed help. Marcus stepped out of his car into the downpour. The wind cut through his jacket like knives, soaking him instantly. He jogged toward the flashing lights, calling out, "Hello? Can you hear me?" His voice was nearly drowned by the storm. When he saw her, his breath caught. The young officer was sprawled on the ground, her uniform torn, blood pooling near her shoulder. Her face was pale, her lips trembling as if whispering something in her sleep. He crouched beside her, his heart racing. "Hey, stay with me, please," he said softly, brushing rainwater from her face. She didn't respond. He pressed his fingers against her neck, searching desperately for a pulse. It was there. Weak, but still fighting. Marcus's hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone. He dialed 911, pressing it hard against his ear as thunder cracked overhead. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm but distant. The lines were flooded with calls from the storm, and the nearest ambulance was delayed. "We'll send help as soon as possible," the voice said. Marcus looked down at Rachel, her chest rising shallowly, her skin turning colder by the minute. "She doesn't have time," he muttered almost to himself. He dropped the phone and tore off his own shirt, pressing it against her wound to slow the bleeding. The rain was washing everything away, but he kept pressure steady, whispering, "Come on, come on. You can't give up now." When her head tilted to the side, Marcus knew he couldn't wait another second. He slid his arms beneath her, feeling the weight of her body limp against his chest. She was smaller than he expected, fragile. As he lifted her, pain shot through his back, but he ignored it. He opened the back door of his car and gently laid her down, tucking his jacket over her trembling body. For a brief moment he looked at her face, the faint flicker of life still there. "You'll make it, officer," he said, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his throat. "I promise you'll make it." He jumped into the driver's seat and hit the gas. The car roared forward, tires splashing through flooded patches of road. His headlights cut through sheets of rain as he pushed past warning signs and detours. A fallen tree blocked the next stretch of road. He slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. Stepping out into the freezing rain again, Marcus used every ounce of strength to drag the heavy branches aside. His arms burned, but adrenaline carried him through. When he returned to the car, Rachel's breathing had grown faint. He leaned over and whispered, "Just hang on a little longer, please." The minutes crawled by like hours. His windshield wipers struggled against the storm, the glass fogging from his heavy breathing. Lightning lit up the road in violent flashes, showing the path ahead for mere seconds. The hospital was still miles away, but turning back wasn't an option. Marcus's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as he whispered prayers between breaths. "Don't die on me now. You're gonna make it." When he finally saw the faint red glow of the hospital sign, relief washed over him. He pulled up to the emergency entrance, slammed the car door open, and shouted for help. Nurses and orderlies ran toward him as he lifted Rachel out of the back seat. "She's a cop. She needs help now," he yelled. His voice cracked and his body shook from exhaustion, but he didn't stop until he saw them place her on a stretcher. Marcus stood there, drenched, watching as they wheeled her inside under the harsh white hospital lights. His heart was still racing, unsure if she would live or die. A nurse turned to him asking his name, but he barely heard her. His eyes followed Rachel disappearing behind swinging double doors. For the first time all night, Marcus let out a long breath and sank to his knees on the wet pavement, rain still falling over him. He didn't know it yet, but the choice he made on that lonely road, the choice to stop when no one else would, had just set off a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. The storm showed no mercy. Wind battered the sides of Marcus's old sedan as rain lashed across the windshield, blurring everything into a gray haze. The wipers screeched back and forth, trying and failing to keep up. The road ahead was a dark, endless river of water, but Marcus didn't lift his foot from the gas. Every mile felt heavier, every minute louder in his chest. Beside him, Rachel lay barely breathing, her skin cold and her lips pale. Her police badge had fallen into his lap when he'd carried her in, glinting faintly under the flickering dashboard light. It reminded him of the weight of what he was doing. A black man alone, in the middle of the night, rushing through a storm with a wounded officer in his car. But he didn't care. He only saw a life slipping away. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the cracked highway and the scattered debris from the storm. Marcus leaned forward, squinting through the rain, whispering to himself, "Hold on. Just hold on a little longer." Every breath Rachel took sounded fragile, almost too quiet to believe it was real. He kept glancing at her, one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near her chest to make sure it was still rising. Then the car jolted violently. He slammed on the brakes, tires skidding across the flooded asphalt. A massive tree lay across the road, its roots torn from the earth by the storm. Marcus cursed under his breath, slamming his fist against the steering wheel. "Not now," he muttered, his voice breaking with frustration. He looked at Rachel. She was slipping away, her breathing weaker than before. There was no time to think. He threw open the car door and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit him like ice, instantly soaking him to the bone. Wind whipped through his hair as he stared at the fallen tree, huge and heavy, blocking the only path forward. Marcus ran toward it, his boots sinking into the mud, and began pushing with all his strength. His muscles screamed, but he refused to stop. The bark tore at his hands, the rain blinded his eyes, but he pushed harder, gasping for air, growling through clenched teeth. Inch by inch, the tree began to shift. Finally, with one last desperate shove, he cleared enough space for his car to squeeze through. He stumbled back, panting, his body trembling from exhaustion. As he turned toward the car, a flash of lightning lit up the sky, and for a second he saw his reflection in the side mirror. Soaked, bleeding, shaking. A stranger in the storm. He almost laughed at the madness of it all, but there was no time for relief. Inside the car, Rachel stirred. Her eyes fluttered open barely. Her voice came out as a whisper, fragile and trembling. "Who are you?" Marcus looked at her, a faint smile breaking through the worry on his face. "Just someone who couldn't drive away," he said softly. She tried to respond, but her eyes rolled back and her body went still again. Panic shot through him like electricity. Hey, stay with me," he shouted, his voice cracking as he grabbed her hand. He could feel how cold she was, her pulse fading. He yanked off his jacket and wrapped it tightly around her, tucking it close under her chin to keep her warm. His hands shook, but his voice was steady as he whispered, "You'll make it, officer. I promise you that." The storm howled outside as if mocking his words, but he refused to believe she would die. Not tonight. Not like this. Marcus pushed the car back onto the road and drove through the storm as though nothing else in the world existed. The dashboard lights flickered and his old engine groaned, but the car didn't stop. Every bump in the road felt like it could break the vehicle apart, yet he pushed harder, gripping the steering wheel with all his strength. His eyes burned from the rain, his breath fogged the glass, but he kept going. After what felt like hours of endless driving through the storm's fury, the faint red glow of a hospital sign finally appeared in the distance. "Almost there," he whispered, half to her, half to himself. The moment the car skidded into the emergency lane, he jumped out, sprinting to the passenger side. Without hesitation, he lifted Rachel into his arms again, her body limp and weightless against him. His legs trembled under the strain, but he didn't stop until he burst through the hospital doors. "She's an officer. She's been hurt," he shouted. The words barely left his mouth before doctors and nurses swarmed around them, taking Rachel from his arms and wheeling her toward the trauma room. Marcus stumbled back, soaked and shaking, his heart still racing. He leaned against the wall, gasping for air, feeling his knees buckle. For a moment, everything went silent except the pounding of his heart and the rain still echoing outside. He sank to the floor, closing his eyes, whispering a small prayer for the stranger he had fought so hard to save. "Please, let her live." When he finally opened his eyes, flashing lights painted the room in red and blue. Police cars had arrived. Officers hurried inside, and the moment they saw him, a tall black man, drenched, covered in blood, sitting alone near an injured officer's stretcher, their hands went to their holsters. The tension in the air snapped tight. Marcus looked up, confused, exhausted, and said softly, "I brought her here. She was dying." But his words were met with suspicion. The same man who had risked his life to save hers now found himself surrounded, judged not by what he had done, but by who he was. And as they questioned him under the flicker of hospital lights, Marcus realized something chilling. Saving her life might have just put his own in danger. By the time the sun broke through the clouds the next morning, the storm had cleared, but something darker had already begun to spread. The news traveled faster than the wind that had wrecked the city the night before. Unknown black man found near injured police officer. That single line appeared on every screen, every radio update, every police report. The rumors twisted and multiplied before the truth could take its first breath. Some said he attacked her. Others whispered that he ran from the scene. No one cared to ask what really happened. No one asked what kind of man stops in a storm to save a stranger's life. Inside the hospital, the air was cold and sterile, filled with the hum of machines. Marcus sat alone in a small white room, still wearing his wet clothes. His hands were cuffed to the table, the metal biting into his wrists. Across from him sat two detectives, both with stern faces and tired eyes. One of them flipped through a notepad while the other just stared at him like he was already guilty. "Why were you there?" The first one asked for the fifth time. Marcus raised his head slowly, his voice quiet but firm. "I told you. I was driving home. I saw her car. I saw her on the road. She was bleeding. I helped her." The detective's pen scratched against the paper. "So you expect us to believe you just stopped in the middle of nowhere? For a cop?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Because she needed help," he said simply. "She was dying." His voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. But it didn't matter. The detectives exchanged glances, the kind of look that said they had already made up their minds. "You didn't touch her weapon?" one asked. "No." "You didn't take anything?" "No." "Then why were you covered in blood?" Marcus's eyes filled with disbelief. "Because I was trying to keep her alive," he said, his voice breaking. They didn't flinch. They just wrote more notes. To them, he wasn't a man who saved a life. He was a suspect in handcuffs. Hours passed. The same questions repeated again and again, as if the truth might somehow change if they wore him down enough. Marcus stopped answering after a while, his silence heavier than any protest. He just stared at the floor, his mind replaying the night over and over. The crash, her faint pulse, the whisper of her voice asking who he was. He had done everything right. He had done what no one else did. Yet, here he was, treated like a criminal for choosing compassion. Meanwhile, only a few doors away, Officer Rachel Myers lay unconscious in her hospital bed. Machines beeped steadily beside her. Her skin had regained a little color, her body no longer fighting for every breath. Nurses checked her vitals and whispered softly around her, unaware that their words echoed in Marcus's heart somewhere down the hall. "Poor girl," one nurse murmured. The man they caught was right next to her car. He must have done it. Rachel's body slept, but her mind was restless. Flashes of memory flickered like lightning through the fog. She saw rain, headlights, a man's trembling hands pressing against her wound. She heard a voice, deep and desperate, whispering, "You'll make it, officer. I promise." That voice had carried her through the darkness when everything else had gone silent. 2 days later, her eyes finally fluttered open. The white ceiling came into focus first, then the soft hum of the machines, then the ache in her shoulder. She blinked several times, disoriented, her breath shallow. A nurse gasped softly, "Officer Myers, you're awake." Relief filled the room as doctors rushed in, checking her vitals, calling for charts. Rachel tried to speak, her throat dry. "What happened?" She managed to whisper. "You were in a crash," the nurse said gently. "You've been out for a while, but you're safe now." Rachel nodded weakly, then her brows furrowed as fragments returned. "The man," she said. "Where's the man who brought me here?" The nurse froze for a moment, exchanging glances with another staff member. No one spoke at first. Finally, one of them said quietly, "He's being held for questioning." Rachel's eyes widened, confusion flickering into disbelief. "Held?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. The nurse nodded. "The police think he might have been involved." Rachel's heart dropped. She turned her head toward the window where raindrops still clung to the glass, and the memory of his voice echoed again. The calm, trembling tone, the warmth in his words. "You'll make it, officer. I promise." That didn't sound like a man who wanted to hurt her. That sounded like someone who wanted her to live. As the night fell once more, Rachel lay in her hospital bed staring at the ceiling, her heart beating faster not from fear, but from guilt. Somewhere in this same building, the man who saved her life was being treated like a threat. The same man who had carried her through the storm now sat alone, in handcuffs, paying the price for his kindness. Something inside her stirred, a quiet, powerful conviction. She didn't remember his face clearly, but she remembered his courage. She remembered how his arms had lifted her from the road, how his voice had kept her alive when everything else was slipping away. Deep down, she knew he wasn't the villain everyone claimed he was. Rachel turned her head toward the doorway and whispered to the nurse, "I want to see him." The nurse hesitated. "That might not be possible yet," she said softly. "Please," Rachel insisted. Her voice was weak, but her will was firm. "He saved me. I need to see him." For the first time since the accident, Officer Rachel Myers felt her strength returning. Not because of the medicine, but because she had a truth to uncover. And she wouldn't rest until the man who saved her was seen for what he truly was. Not a suspect, but a hero. Rain still whispered across the city as Rachel slowly recovered in her hospital bed, her body aching, but her spirit restless. She couldn't shake the echo of that man's voice, the stranger who had carried her through the storm, who'd risked his own life to save hers. Yet now he was being treated like a criminal. The thought twisted inside her chest. She needed answers. When the doctors left her room that morning, Rachel demanded to see the hospital's CCTV footage. The nurse hesitated but finally relented, rolling in a small monitor. Rachel's fingers trembled as she pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The automatic doors swung open and there he was, Marcus Hill. His shirt was torn, soaked in blood and rain. His hands shook as he carried her limp body in his arms, his face carved with fear and desperation. He didn't hesitate, didn't run. He shouted for help and refused to let go until the doctors came. Not once did he raise his voice or act violently. Every frame screamed of humanity, not harm. Rachel's eyes filled with tears as the truth unfolded before her. This man had been her miracle, not her attacker. By the next morning, the media was in chaos. The city was divided. Some believed Marcus guilty, others unsure. Rachel asked for a press conference. The department tried to stop her, but her mind was set. She wouldn't let another minute go by while the man who saved her suffered in silence. That afternoon, reporters flooded the police headquarters. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded the podium. Rachel stepped forward, wearing her uniform and a small bandage across her forehead. The room quieted. She took a breath, her voice trembling with emotion but laced with strength. That man, she began, her eyes locking onto the crowd, "didn't hurt me. He saved my life. If Marcus Hill hadn't stopped that night, I wouldn't be standing here today." For a moment, no one moved. Then a wave of stunned silence filled the hall. Officers exchanged glances, guilt washing over their faces. Reporters froze, pens suspended in midair. Rachel continued, her tone rising with conviction. "He fought the storm, carried me through miles of flooded roads, and begged for help when no one else would. He was treated like a suspect, when he was the only hero out there." A single tear rolled down her cheek, her voice breaking slightly. "And I won't stay silent while his name is dragged through the mud." Cameras clicked. The world listened. Within hours, the footage was released publicly. The narrative flipped overnight. The same headline that once painted Marcus as a monster now called him a savior. Social media erupted in disbelief and admiration. People demanded justice and apology. By the end of the week, Marcus was officially cleared of all suspicion. Reporters flooded the small neighborhood where he lived, but he stayed away from the noise, spending his evenings in quiet corners of a nearby park, feeding pigeons and staring at the sky. He didn't do it for fame. He never had. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Rachel found him sitting on a weathered bench. He looked up, surprised but gentle as always. She stood there for a moment, holding back tears before speaking softly. "You saved me," she said, her voice shaking with gratitude. "And the world deserves to know your name." Marcus smiled faintly and shook his head. "I didn't do it for the world," he said quietly. "I just couldn't drive away." His words pierced her heart, simple yet profound. She sat beside him, and for a long while neither spoke, the silence between them heavier than words. A week later, under a wide blue sky, a special ceremony was held at the city hall. Police officers filled the front rows, their uniforms gleaming, but their expressions humble. The mayor stood at the podium, speaking of courage, compassion, and the power of doing what's right even when no one is watching. Then, Rachel stepped forward, holding a small box in her hands. As Marcus approached the stage, the crowd rose in applause. She placed the medal around his neck, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Not all heroes wear badges. Some just carry a brave heart." Marcus lowered his head, emotion glistening in his eyes. The applause grew louder, echoing off the walls and into the hearts of everyone there. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. A man, once judged for the color of his skin, now honored for the strength of his soul. Rachel smiled through tears as Marcus looked at her, both of them knowing that this moment was bigger than either of them. It was proof that kindness still had power, even in a world clouded by fear and prejudice. As the ceremony ended, Marcus stepped outside, looking up at the sky that once poured rain over him. This time, the sun shone bright, breaking through the clouds. Rachel joined him at the steps, her voice soft. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "That maybe storms aren't just meant to break us," he said. "Sometimes they bring strangers together, to remind us there's still light left in this world." And with that, they walked side by side into the sunlight, their story now written in the hearts of millions, a reminder that true heroism isn't found in power, but in compassion that dares to act when no one else will.